Is the site you're currently looking at is being sold with a consented scheme? The numbers look tempting. Planning approval is in place. But how confident are you that the approved scheme can actually be built? What are the hidden traps? And most importantly, what could be done better? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Councils approve schemes based on policy compliance. They do not assess whether the scheme complies with building regulations. They do not check whether it's buildable. And they certainly do not check whether it's financially optimal for you as a developer. The natural assumption many developers make that just because the scheme was developed by professionals, it's well considered, is often wrong. In fact, many approved schemes that we see are what we call stillborn projects. They have planning consent, but they cannot be delivered without major redesign. Hello, I'm Victor Rohacs from Rohacs Architects. For over 8 years, we have been helping developers to maximize their project values in and around London. Over that time, we have reviewed and taken over dozens of underperforming schemes. Small infill developments, large multi-unit residential projects, redevelopment proposals, commercial to residential conversions, and airspace developments. In many cases, we have discovered that the approved proposals had fundamental issues. Issues that required major redesigns, changes in the unit mix, additional planning approvals, and sometimes build costs would escalate to the point where the project was unviable. Without trying to be a scaremonger, I would like to go through some of the most common issues that we encounter when we are looking at approved schemes. This subject is so large that we split this into 2 episodes. This is part 1. One of the first things that we assess is whether the building falls under the higher risk building category. Many developers are still not entirely clear on this classification, but it matters enormously. If your project qualifies as a higher risk building under the Building Safety Act, the regulatory regime becomes enormously more demanding. This means stricter technical requirements, longer design process, additional approvals, and more complex construction oversight. If this is not understood clearly in the acquisition stage, it could have a major impact on program cost and viability. Another issue we frequently see relates to building height thresholds. Many approved schemes, especially airspace proposals, a lot of the time unintentionally trigger stricter requirements. These thresholds can affect the evacuation strategy, firefighters' access, facade materials, and general fire safety infrastructure. When a building crosses one of these thresholds, it may require substantially more complex technical solutions. And those solutions very often require more space and cost that the approved scheme simply does not have. Fire safety is probably the biggest issue we encounter. Often an approved scheme comes with what appears to be a fire strategy, but in reality it is just a planning stage fire statement. That's a very different thing to a full fire strategy, because a planning stage statement just demonstrates policy compliance. But a full fire strategy explains how the building can be built and used safely. This is where problems emerge. Typical issues include excessive escape distances, insufficient number of escape stairs, compartmentation problems, absence of smoke ventilation and lack of stair lobbies, missing dry risers or sprinkler infrastructure. And when these issues are addressed properly, they very often require significant spatial changes to the approved layouts. And this often means less sellable area. Another common issue is fire brigade access, which sounds quite straightforward, but it regularly causes problems. The typical issues are that the access roads are not wide enough, the gated entrances are either not wide or not tall enough, excessive hose laying distances from the fire tender to the building. And these issues are rarely examined thoroughly during planning stage, but they become critical during technical design and building regulations approval. Resolving them later can become very expensive. The London plan requires evacuation lifts provided in all firefighting stairs. And surprisingly, many approved schemes simply don't include these. Introducing an evacuation lift later very often requires layout change, structural changes, and loss of valuable net area. Again, something that directly affects your development value. Finally, there's the issue of the design of the stairs. Because in many schemes that we review or we come across, the communal stairs very often do not comply with building regulations Part B, Part K, and Part M. The common problems include the stair flights are too narrow, too many risers in one stair flight, the going and the riser dimensions are excessive, undersized landings and doors opening to landings where they shouldn't. Correcting these issues almost always requires redesigning the core. And redesigning the core very often means reducing net area. So if these issues are not examined as early as possible, fixing them could become very expensive later. They could affect your program, your construction cost, your unit mix, and your net sellable area, which ultimately means they affect your profit. So if you're considering a residential project, reviewing a consented scheme, and you're wondering whether the design really stacks up, speak to us at Rohacs Architects. Because the earlier we can identify these risks, the easier and cheaper they are to fix. In the next episode, we will look at further issues that we routinely come across in approved schemes, which are quietly destroying your development values if they are left unchecked. I hope you found this video interesting. Although we made all reasonable efforts to make sure that the information here is accurate at the time of release, it's intended for educational purposes only, and it does not substitute professional advice. Make sure you consult a professional about your project. Many thanks for watching, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the next episodes.